the jewel of the Buddha, the doctor, the great healer. The second jewel, in terms of the medicine, then it is the jewel of Dharma. And specifically, this medicine that heals, this dharmic elixir that heals, is the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. And who is it that helps to dispense this medicine, make sure that we get this truth of the path, this truth of cessation medicine? This is the jewel of the Sangha. So in that way, we have the jewel of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha to cure our illnesses.
Ni kebar mangboja hago dana nangpade ji jungde yachembo shibu chabares dini chomdendege kanje nyomong pangtaptang gewa tutap cheyada chomdende rangi ndegyu kanga dana pudi yadang sumjuyores chomdende rangi sum ani jagarge pentugi sumsha kyotela pudi nigayores dindi beteka ko
pude nigya di hakoma songenla
jagarge pentu yorwa jagarge khebatu sum domna pudi nigya da dunjitonga dos tindi ko nyoram ko joji gyachembo inza ani pe tepte mangpo chabare esirwa
la sogena. And so then this is really the extraordinary speciality of the Buddha Dharma, this Buddha Dharma and the Sangha, this great healer, the medicine, the path, and the Sangha who help us on the path. This is really a very the speciality of Buddhism. Now within Buddhism, the teachings are very vast and extensive, and they are designed. What they help us do is help us abandon our afflictive emotions and increase our knowledge. Our knowledge then increases, and the Buddha himself taught many of the spoken words of the Buddha, which are captured and preserved within the sutras. Are numerous, and not only that, then the commentaries that were later composed by the great Indian masters actually number more than 200. So if you look at all of the teachings of the path of Buddhism, it's actually quite extensive.
Wata nyumong nagaji mares, nyumong yidong kachashigores, nyumong singende semrabdu majiwa chaginde mata masono masoda mato gyachembu chadiores.
And these afflictive emotions in sentient beings are also quite numerous. There are said to be 84,000 different kinds of afflictive emotions that can arise in these sentient beings whose minds have not been tamed.
Wata tendawe nyumo men zonijinde mitun jombra jogen chegendeya semen thani gewi chogi semte to chagore this one keparda hamakona sem gidiki to yal pe misibo khabores molam sa gene sem gidiki to ya mares this one kepar hako ani nyumo jengi sem ye meazala gewe chigi sem de compeldu susugula compeldu tangwaji chagores.
And so these 84,000 afflictive mental states and the medicine, the remedy that we must take to train and to remedy these numerous afflictive states is virtue. And so this is something that you need to know. If you don't understand this, then it is very difficult. We need to put virtue into practice, the medicine of virtue into practice to tame these afflictive mental states. And this can't simply be done by aspiring or saying a prayer. And so we need to know this. In order for us to abandon the afflictive emotions and increase the wisdom and qualities in our mind stream, it is this elixir of the Dharma practice that we then engage in to do that.
What are those chine? That kanchen nangpe ngote vive jana 다 덴데진 디가 찌는 마도 디 셴은 조야게요 말이스 나비중데.
Mhm. And so within the to pacify these negative emotional states, create happiness among all of these texts and teachings of the Buddhism, this is what they are involved in.
아니 그나저 college 보드서 단다 디와땅에 있는 단한 디버르데 단한 디그레스.
And if some of you students, it sounds like there are some students there that perhaps, so this was a little bit of introduction to Buddhism, and if some of you students who have ask them now.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh,
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Do you have a question? Does somebody have a question?
어다 띄와 맨나다 ngoma yung 세야도 거기 라른 수드메가 누구 인스로와.
So if you don't have any questions at this time, I can continue with the text we've been working on, the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas.
어다 전주나라 디어 전주가 ялсачим божвалаге 전주나라 미 둘라 센네네 룽알초 칠레트 툰디 친이 녀가웨 몽베트스 니말로 저송레스 땡아나서 굴차 오네 뭐만 왜 니순다 미 레바 차자 저 삼나타네 제바이나 때빼 칼로 빼 미시버 칼로 자침 버지레스와 미 리텐 레 라가지 리텐 라이 리텐나 요 마레 라이 라데조에 미 리텐 톰스 몰람 게거레 미 리텐데 덴데베 셈기 지데 두야라 풀도 좀 남저 연댕에 아니 미 리텐 돌아 세질라 상계게 탑런 차자 연댕인지 미 리테 차디요레 오다 야저 파르도 뚜나진 미 리텐데 아니 코르웨 파르도인데 그 뚜나지 자거레스 아니 뚜데 네베 양내양도 녀여서 요 말에 개외 저기 답에 소소남 라보치 사는 마도 아니 베 딘더비 미 리텐데 토베 요 말에 딘데다다 토베 값들라 고갑데 단진지도 고갑 말라지네 아니 베지 가르소래 아니 수진 미진 둘남데 차상지 두고 그래서 대 때가는 거레스.
And Master Shantideva, and so we'll move on. And so Master Shantideva has said in the way of the Bodhisattva that this very support, something like this very support of the body is like the vessel that through virtue helps us to progress and proceed. So, for example, if we look at our actual situation, the situation we have the support of the human body. And actually this physical support, this human physical support is complete with all of the conditions that we need in order to practice the path. So this is something that we should recognize, and we should understand that it is like, the vessel, like the boat that helps us to cross the great ocean, that helps us cross a great body of water. And we can't count on it that we will again and again obtain this physical body that actually is complete with everything we need to cross this great ocean. We should understand that unless all of the conditions are there and virtue has been collected, we should not think that we will gain this human body again and again. So we should understand, as Master Shantideva has said, this great opportunity in obtaining this ship that helps us cross the ocean.
Sangia Riji Yore. Read the Sebala, Suzuki Chodin, so Sonamsa, Duscena, Riseki Talam Giore, Yengugiri, Oda, Manzo Gavichola Yamlin Jade, Yengugiri Chagore. Maranzo the Sim Ranging Matuba, Sim Wona, Sim Girangin the Ursawa Yimbade, Sim Girangi Ursawa Yimbade, Rangin Risi Chagore, Oda Tesangi Salandoeki, Ride, Oda Telang wins in Chigore, Isra. The Indugala, Simjan Tam Jagula, Sangeri, Yoris, Sungores, Nampini.
Lasso, Ani Geshila di Rangjin Yisi.
Ranjineri
December Ranjineri Sana
Ranjineri Zanata Karsore Macho Sangiagi Sapun
Oh Lasso Deshin Ningpo Dang Drabore
or the singing but the Chibizare, the singing Buzana Min Kagaramada, the singing Buranre.
Lasso game.
What are the good nature Lagdoa in Jinala?
Enginangla Ngaso Tamsam di Buddha nature
Lasso. Water. Chibachi
Lasso.
Aning also now Chinala, the singing ball lagre.
And so, secondly, we are all of the family of the Buddha. We are all within the same family of the Buddha. If we engage in virtue, if we turn our activities towards virtue and accomplish gathering the accumulations of merit, the accumulations of wisdom, then we can bring this all the way to the fruition of the Buddha. That our mind has the nature of luminosity, of cognitive luminosity. This is the ground. This is the ground of the Buddha. This is Buddha nature. Because all sentient beings are pervaded by this ground, we have the we have the potential to, through our accumulations and virtue, achieve Buddhahood.
Rajiniri Siategi Sangiagi Rich Yore Sdila, the Risi, Yosami Pingo Mare. Mazo Seg Ridi, Winzin Tubaji, the Ridi Yo the Hakwajini, Ridi Enibe, Jimata Luburu Imba, Simgirajin the Ursawa Imba, Di Chani, Sangi Kopang to wear Yogaji, Mazo Hakwa, the Shita in nature Muchaliores.
And so it's important for us to know, a very essential point is for us to know that we actually possess this very same nature as the Buddha, which another way to say that is we are in the same clan or the same family of the Buddha. And so recognizing this actually is a very important step.
That Tindi Indigalata, Tindagi Riseala, Manzo, Lobelamni, any Tonito Beltawa and Janjuki Semila, so Yamlin Jade, Tingi Chadiore. Janjuki Sem Yamlin Seade, Mone, Janju Seba Sede, Ran Chinzin and Yembotene, Jen Chinzin, and Ipe, compelled to Tangangela, Janju Seba Sigores, Semjentam, Chikiton Chengi, and it Tindigi. Loyo Kenjela, Chanchu Sebasigore, Diding Mazo Shea Gishide, Jichambo Shibuji Letiores.
Ani Tama della Geshe and Yankasolana and Ko Tumajung.
Oh, Diding Shea Gishio, and Shea the Jide, Chanchuki Semgi, Tapage, Candice Compel Tango, Chanchuki Sem. Seeing the country in the Chanjuki 7 Yamli Jel, Yicheshoji Letiores. Beg Maranzo Suzuki, Tanangaranzo Zonigina, Samlin and take Cormituia, the Nicachigore, they in the Kaboshujiores.
And so we have this Buddha nature. We are pervaded by this Buddha nature. And we should know that when we are practicing, when we are practicing the Buddha Dharma, principally we are practicing and training in the view of emptiness, the view of lack of inherent existence, as well as the mind of bodhicitta. And within the practice of bodhicitta, it is this very practice and training this mind in bodhicitta when we that we will further and further progress along the path. And so what is a bodhisattva is one completely on the altruistic intention of serving all sentient beings rather than self, of considering all sentient beings more, regarding them first rather than oneself. And so that's what it means to be a bodhisattva, one who has the altruistic mind that focuses on others. And when we have this mind of bodhicitta, this is, and along with this ground, this basis of Buddha nature, this is how we further and further progress. However, when we don't possess this embrace this practice of bodhicitta, and we are ordinary beings, and we are considered ordinary beings, then progressing along the paths and bhumis is rather difficult.
samlu tangsanji kachi shigore. Di indikala nga digiti ngaranzu tata ngazu zosu nyumun chiwa kunde indeginji semna tsuya kona yo mare sirwa. Ina kazo tuptuju molam gyab. Janju seba ina taga nyamne tata chi tupgu wares. Ngazu zonde jina tos kabucha gores.
And so then we can meet with difficulties in our life, with adverse circumstances, and so there is the saying that we carry these difficulties along the path. We turn these very difficulties into virtuous practice. And if we can take our, a difficulty, some difficult situation that happens to us, and actually turn it to virtue, it's really excellent. And there's no one without afflictive emotions, without, this potential for afflictive emotions. All minds are not different in that state. And so, it is difficult to always take these difficulties on the path and turn them into virtue. But we can do it, and along with carrying it along with bodhicitta, it is indeed very possible.
Wada shologa jusum badres rao lam kerzede. Ta tambun rao lam de kerwala rao ndasingide windin tubaji guru was.
Jusum ba ani rela.
Ta shologa jusum bade.
Lasso. And so now in our text, then we turn to the verse 13, which indeed speaks to this very thing, carrying an adverse circumstance, carrying a difficulty into our path of spiritual practice.
Jaza ta dra sidigala nepa kyanginjila drala gyo resirwa. They no have any book, right? Over there have book, maybe give. Yeah, they give the book, maybe. Wada drasigidila neba chinginjila drasigores. Ta neba dela neba ni be zap chijung kebar be chemboyores roa. Nonda namba sene chinda nanginda zede dradela ni kebar chigores.
And so now we have verse 13, which, speaks of enemies who harm us. And so we have, when we think of somebody as an enemy, when we consider what does it mean to have an enemy, this is someone who causes us harm, someone who hurts us. And then there can be a differentiation in how severe this harm is that is incurred. And according to Buddhism, we have both the outer enemies and there are the inner enemies to consider.
친다신데 당 알아서 에 구마 자파 랑생에 따텐디지 소소는 베경에 칸에 루즈체난다 류게니 토점반다 디수강가 친다 차대요레스 배전에 셔야 된다
the sumpa the chakpa
오 작바스는 오 작바스는 아주 좀근여와 융우부 좀근
la sodiha ko song di kuma dang chakpa dam sumpa di
아니
kare sumpe
소통해요라 미생에 소통해
laso
오다 되게 간가 아니 친다 차대요레스 류가라 너치 쟁인 차대요라 배전에 셔야도 어디 셔요레스
And so, what are these outer enemies? Well, the harm that comes from thieves and bandits, those who threaten our very life, those that would come and harm us in some kind of a material or a physical way that can cause us some kind of physical harm to our body in this way. These are considered, according to Buddhism, these are considered outer enemies.
이 낭비다 잠시 내가 지금 말해 원했잖아 장외마다 낭라래 이 낭박이다 내가 쳐대 낭라 요긴 라데 아니 둘이게 탑시 슈체체 구고 아래서 숨고 아래스
But according to Buddhism, these aren't the real enemies. These aren't the enemies that we really need to be concerned with. The enemies that we really need to be concerned with are the enemies. And this is a very, very essential point of Buddhism, these inner enemies that need to be tamed.
디인디가라 야와 겐든두 야와 꾸단 땅보 겐든두게 나나는 두베 뇽문 투저스무레스 맞아 당외마 데라 뇽문 수지규레요게 뇽문데 에네 ndalong은진지거레스 디긴 가서 루보 너구 에 가티나 미니 치마차레인데 그네네 셈마키베요인데 뇽문그지기어레스 친다게 된데란 제두고 말레스 와 맞아 친달라 쪼야요레 뇽문분달라 쪼서 미두스
And so, ani the gendron, ani kuchang tangpo?
Kuchang tangpo, yeah.
And the first Gendron Rinpoche, ani the
What's the Dalai
has said that the enemy, the real enemy of the afflictive emotions, which is present in our very mind stream, is the one that is to be tamed. And so the real enemy is the enemy of the negative emotions, the enemy of the mental poisons that arise. The outer enemy, they can cause some difficulty and some harm, and then there is a place, then they're gone, then they go away. But these enemies within these inner enemies, there is it's not like they run away. There's nowhere for them to go, these inner enemies.
어떻든지 니가라다 단다 회전이 해야 돼 친다기 라 니베 친은 다시 주나 데라 니베 삼로 간디스 땅구여 왔다 장주 세바 있나 아니 디 트rum파 널린 수 너바지나 수 너바 파 너바 마켈제 파 펜바투야기 어다 널린 너베 만절 널린 펜베투야지 삼로 땅 거레스 어다 데라 니베 람도 케르제 세야 돼 어드레스
And so now within this verse, it talks about how do we deal with these outer enemies? How do we deal when somebody comes and causes us harm? Well, what a bodhisattva in the way of the bodhisattva, then with a bodhisattva, when someone harms them, then they, in return, they don't react. They then don't cause harm back. And not only do they not harm the harm doer, but they actually look to benefit the harm doer. And that's within this verse 13.
어떤 라올람 키기 치 코란데 가른도라 달라 녜파 춘제 메진두 간다자게 고체나양스 니지왕게 띠디바남 달라렘바 갈셀라레 인저 숭구도 와스 따팅 가란조 란친진 슈 촘보 진 영엔지라 디페 롤추야 nga존디지나 로추 카보레 이나양 ngaranzo lo chugumindu zerkeche shen jaya mare ngone yani yandu samuda yani yandu 직 제바체나 kalé kalendilo komdi lene eni kho yondenji thongaya yoresi.
Mhm. And so, how do we think about carrying these difficulties when we meet with them in life onto the path? Well, we can look at the text. And in the text, it says, although we're not guilty of any offense and never have harmed anyone in our life, if someone deluded should threaten to kill us because he is crazed with a tormented mind, then mercifully wishing him not to suffer further misfortune because of his state, selflessly take on the effects of his actions. The son of the Buddhas all practice in this way. And I have an alternate a summary of this. Even if someone tries to cut off your head when you haven't done the slightest wrong, out of compassion, take all his misdeeds upon yourself. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Now, for someone, an ordinary being who considers themselves more important than others, they really put themselves first and their own concerns first. Something like this would be a difficult practice. However, if we think about when harm comes to us, if we think about, as we've said, how to not react, but rather wish to benefit, and we think about it again and again and practice it again and again, then slowly we actually will get used to it. It will become our habit, we will habituate it, and we will be able to put this into practice.
어다가 집에 지경 집에 치다 잡으차디요래. 소다링이 되나려요래스. 와, 좀 된데긴 도코라나라. 아니 가르사 랑부 징여발할 때 미라기스. 아니 수림차는 딸라 마이노서래. 랑부 징여배 첸디 소초지기 소초그리스. 술짐자네 겨원 문라라네 배간 소명한소 아니 술짐자네 리바 미고 와사 미게 왕기 간송라 겨원 문라 뭐보에네 배 간송루누 아치그리스. 오다 티니 리가라 리발라 벤 zem바체고데 시부진네 첨버리데 좀 된데 랑게 수요레스.
알라소 아니 게실라 gondati langpa gi korlan sultum gi korla go through much. I'm sorry, gonda.
디레 좀 된데 소다긴 도여런 도생지. 오티나라 ngani 랑부칭 님발라 다그 마레스 지기 마레스 좀 된데 이나 랑부칭 님발라 지기 미두스. 아니 디베트 오포지나 텔라 아니 다그레 가르자니 지그레스 지낭 레기두스 술림 차레이나 디베트 오포 술림 차레이나 겨와 문타 망보에네 간송도 끼그레 랑보칭 님베 첸디 지기 소토그레 아니 겨와 망보지라 디베 리바사와테당 첸디 소니난 첸디 소들레 땅나 야그레세 숭고아레스 아니 리바생디 첸디 자침보레 어다 디나라 숭도아스 니제왕기 디바 남즈르 디바 남 디바 망치체 디바 시리가라 당 아니베 직파기 삼르다네 디발란 젬바체고야디 어다 갈롭테 난겨레스
La so gonda kena ani yapo hakoma son gonda nga sepak chedurme nga dekorla gonda di dogi donda di
dodu ta deni din lan digro rangin goche padang dibache ba ninani damga tangina nangbangoni chanchu seba jigin damga tangina chanchu sebe kang damgrezena rangin goche den damgre mazo dibache den damg mares.
Hola so
Ote so chandidu
Also. And so the Buddha, so we have within verse 13 where the harm doer actually does try to actually harm one's own life, as it says that wishes, even if someone tries to cut off your head, or if someone deluded should threaten to kill us. So the Buddha himself in the sutras has spoken to this, that actually rather that in reacting in a negative way is such severe harm to us, that the negativity that if we react can send us to the lower realms for a very long time. So that rather than reacting with negativity, then one does not react in negativity, knowing it will send one to the lower realms. But in brief, what it means is that it's better to give one's own head, to take on this harm, rather than gain the negativity that would come from reacting back negatively.
리바 신데 문진 투바제네 아니 리베 견토나 보다 고제에다 리바니는 리바 맞아지 고제나 때 야그리스 세야디 덴덴 규생 요레스로와 때마다 디 균 마통긴지라 베디얌 캔자부지 따다 가르서 그래 삼르는 멋스바 용시그레스.
And so when you really understand the result of negativity, the fault in negativity and the harm in our negative actions, then we can then understand the meaning in the text here, that it is better for us to take on the own effects of his own actions rather than to act in a negative way. When we understand the faults of negative actions, then we can understand the meaning of this verse. When someone does not understand the faults of negativities, the downfalls of negativity, understanding this verse might be very hard. Now, it is possible that some can just read this and understand, but understand it. But the principle here is knowing the fault in the negative reaction.
What the lamkerjuk sum jude 오늘 삼로 야부 지다네 냠는 제발라 즈파 야부 즈스미 야부지 메나 디용야 카보레스로와 데 미즈바 카보레스 마랑조 셈라 추야 카보레스.
And so, like carrying difficulty onto the path, such severe difficulty as it speaks to in verse number 13, is incredibly hard unless we think about it really carefully. Unless we think about it really carefully and bring it into our practice, it's really incredibly hard for our minds to be able to understand how we could possibly act in such a way. But with consideration and thinking again and again and bringing it into our practice, then we can do this.
어떻게니 이거라 즈바싱데 즈베 파인 당 즈베 아니 미팅초 문진 투웨데 개침차디요 레스 즈베 미팅초 되니 까르르잖아 콩조당 제당니 레스 아니 제당당 콩리 견통거래 디통나 아니 즈바 라 토낭레그레 디마토나 즈바 라 토낭레 가버레스.
And so in order to do this, in order to be able to carry such difficulties that happen within our life into our spiritual practices in this way, it really counts on patience. We really need patience to be able to work with this. And so then we have to then be on guard for the discordant factors of patience, which are anger and hatred, things that get us stirred up. These are kind of opposing factors to to patience. So we have to guard ourselves from this anger and hatred, for it's actually patience that will allow us to have success in carrying adversity into our path of practice.
아니 다 즈비님 가르쳐 즈비 미팅죠 공족이 님이는 땅 하나도 통치수여 버렸어 다망으로 차그래 어다 공족전에 미대네 아니 닌게니 시야 냥가요래 어다 공족수 전부 끝이 나텔라 tropu nyunyu bada nga so ngusum setup chayores te lungdang go mare ripatang go mare mi go wambe mi kontro chendela tropu nyunyu bada nga so thonchu si yobares
아니 디 미니스나
라
건다 고스마송
라
아니 드라마 포레 아니 디
kontro
하고선
cheni
디
mi de
컨트롤 디
kontro shu chombo yo gane mi de la ramang yores ro tropu nyungu
Oh,
yores
lasso. Uh-huh. And so when we talk about the opposite of patience, or the kind of the discordant factor, mental factor from patience, and this is anger and hatred. And actually, a person who is very angry, an angry person, has far more enemies and fewer friends. For these people, they're angry. They may speak bad words. They're upsetting. So they have more enemies and fewer friends.
wada zubi pain kariyozna sendilena tobu mangbo ani ngoshe mangbo ani pe dendi yaboyore kewa chimaina ani karsa zubin zeshin hyo tambala pandalo milimishole sendila zobatene kewa chima ani pe 간디지나 루덴 장보당 비다보당 제보당 이동화 기그레스데 로번 다와타부 그 숭여레스
로번
다와타파
다와타파 okay.
잔다 그르티
And so then what are the benefits on the other side? What are the benefits said to be of patience? The benefits are patience that are in this life. One will have many good relationships, good friends, and associations, and it will bring happiness in this life. And then Master Chandrakirti has said that through having patience in this life, the result is in the next life one will have a beautiful or handsome appearance, a good physical form. One will have this radiance of beauty of sorts, and a very good like a physical situation.
What 데이터 제마된 로이나 민님발람 켈싱인데 다데 당보 소자처 에네 민님발람 키 람도 키레 키란 키루데 직 숍지 주나스 와 쇼로가 정아빠들에도 라올람 키
추 시바디 콘다크만 게실라 카르스
쇼로가 주지바들에도 어때
라소 아니 당포 라소 겐나 라소 하고
어때 민님 람케르 근디 람도 케르 건가 민님 발람케르 징을 람케르 로두 람케르 람케르 건가 저섬 야부지오나 람도 케르 투사 저섬 야부 맹엔지 디건가 람도 케르 투야 가보래 들어와 저섬 야부지 여바다 라
Ogondak dralwa jets dralwa
soldier
the trakyaki dralwa jets
ready soldier choice then zomna de la was
lasso and so now in just a moment we will have a tea break, and when we resume we will resume on verse 14. And verse 14 talks about when somebody may kind of use verbal slander or say negative words or, words that hurt us and affect us. And so something to think about before we go into the break is even when somebody says negative, so again, we're talking about carrying difficult circumstances. How do we deal with this? How do we turn it into virtue? Again, it's with this mind of patience. When somebody says something negative to us or about us, it's this mind of patience that helps us work with it. When somebody doesn't have this patient mind, but rather is, kind of has more of a negative attitude, then for them to actually carry it into their spiritual practice when this kind of harm comes to them would be very difficult. So now we'll take a tea break, and then we'll come back and start with verse 14.